Hey, Rachel.
Get things kicked off here. Robin, can you pull up the agenda for me? I was getting my board docs going too. Whenever you get a chance.
You ready?
Yes, ma'am.
You see it?
Okay. Yes, I do. So the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Can everyone please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item, item B on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion?
I move that we approve the meeting minutes for February 25th, 2021.
We're on item B. Sorry, this is the approval of the agenda.
Oh, approval. I move that we approve the agenda.
Perfect.
For today,
yes.
March 25th, 2021.
Awesome. Dick, did you second?
Yes, I did.
Wonderful. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, call for the vote. Aye.
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 Perfect. Unanimous. Robin, do we have any public comments today?
No, ma'am.
Awesome. So moving along then to item D is the approval of the February 25th committee meeting minutes. Can I get a motion on those minutes?
I move that we approve the February 25th, 2021 committee meeting minutes.
I second it.
Perfect. Colonel Geier made the motion. Ms. Middleton second. Do we have any discussion on those minutes? No. Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Great. So moving on to item E is an update on the realtor emails. So I just want to confirm first that the other board members saw the series of emails that I sent out. Basically same thing to everybody, to different realtor agencies in the Bluffton area.
Yes, and thank you for sending those out.
Perfect, thank you, and you're welcome. I did hear back and just spoke with one of the agencies in the area. They said they have about 70 realtors, but those cover various different areas. So they were going to be sending out, sorry, I've got kids being loud. Sorry, hopefully you didn't hear all that. So they are going to be sending that survey link to their Bluffton realtors, and we'll leave that open for a few weeks. I'm going to reach out to them, or my plan was to reach out to them just to follow up on that in a couple weeks and keep track of what kind of activity we're seeing there to see if there's any kind of follow-up we need to send. And then additionally, that agency said that they would, as long as schedules permit, they'd be willing to come and speak to us as well. So do we have any questions about or comments about the realtor emails? Nope. Okay. So then I will leave that at that and wait to see what kind of response we get from those surveys being sent out to that agency, and see if we hear back from any others. I certainly can send a follow-up to the others that we haven't heard back from and just see if they got my correspondence, if you all would like me to.
Yes, it doesn't hurt to follow up with them.
Doesn't hurt. Perfect. Okay, so I'll do that. And then item F is an update on scheduling a meeting with the town of Bluffton officials. I did reach out to the mayor, and she asked me to contact their administrator to schedule something. And she did note and make comment that if there is more than 3 members of the council that were going to participate, it would have to be publicly noticed. And I think that that's fine. So I plan on contacting the administrator and seeing if we can get them to perhaps come to our next scheduled meeting, if that is okay with you all.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Perfect. Well, that was quick, those 2 items. So the next item is item G, and that's discussion on Bluffton Early Childhood Centers. And I know that we had spoken about some different data points that we were perhaps looking towards in the kindergarten range. We are fortunate enough to have Miss Ashley Hutchinson joining us today to answer our questions. And Colonel Geier, I believe you also had some questions, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ashley, we had a discussion at the work day session.
Yes.
About early childhood, the results of our pre-kindergarten tests, which was quite alarming, and the discussion about having the ability to perhaps use some of the unused capacity north of the Broad, use some classrooms for pre-K instruction. And I said, that sounds really good, that we have the space and we can do that, and we obviously have a need to do that. But we don't have that kind of capacity in the Bluffton area. And so it came to my mind that, the governor's talking about this, about funding this. We know now that we have a big problem and that we really need a pre-K kind of instruction. And I thought, well, then we're going to need probably to put that in the next referendum to build. And what I'd like to do is hear from you, and then perhaps some of our 8% money could be used to do the design work, not only for the location, but also for the permitting and everything else. So when we do another referendum, we'll have shovel-ready childcare centers so we can start constructing them right away. I don't see any way we can do it before we have another referendum, but we sure can't waste any time, and we need to get ahead of it. And that's a really good use, I believe, of 8% money to do the design work for that. So I wanted to see what you thought about it, and not only about how many we might need, but also where they need to be. We know we have some room at some of the south of the Broad locations, but we need to have a discussion about where and how many we are going to need and what kind of capacity we're going to have. And it's not too early to start that. So that's why I asked Dr. Wisnefski to bring that up on today's meeting. Thank you.
So there are several ways that we can look at this, and there's several different scenarios that we need to look at to see how we want to design this or how we want it to look and what capacity and configuration we want it to look to be. So a couple of things to kind of factor in. In the Bluffton area, there is currently no Head Start programs or early Head Start programs. So that, because there is no intervention for our most at-risk population of children in the Bluffton area, that is causing more children to qualify for pre-kindergarten in the Bluffton area. So there's two ways to look at this. I do think that we need to, if we're looking at building a early learning center or two early childhood centers, we need to think very hard about including Head Start in that design and in that capacity. So that is one thing that we need to look at. The other thing is, how are we looking at moving forward pre-kindergarten for all? Or are we looking at, raising that eligibility piece where we're no longer looking at just the children who fall in the 50th percentile and below? We're maybe looking at the 70th percentile and below, which of course would add number of students to that as well. We also need to consider if this is an expansion or is this adding more rooms into our existing elementary school. So if we're looking at taking pre-K out of our existing elementary schools and moving them into these new buildings to free up space for growth in the elementary school, or are we looking at these early childhood centers as true expansion? And are these for children are these new classrooms for children who we're going to bring into the district? So there's a couple of things as a board we've got to answer before we start beginning to design these buildings and how we're going to move forward. But I completely agree with you. It's definitely needed conversation. And I'm here to answer any questions you have as we kind of go through this. Those two big pieces is an expansion, or are we adding to existing what we already have? And then, of course, including Head Start in that conversation as well.
It seems that including Head Start in a conversation, we may be able to use some funding from the Head Start folks. That might make the amount that we have to go into a referendum a little less if we can convince Head Start to do a joint project with us. But that's going to take time, and probably it's not too early to start that process. Would you agree?
I agree. And Robert and I have been working with Head Start on a couple of different projects. When Head Start needs to secure funding for additional spots or additional buildings, they do require a long-term lease. So that's discussion that we have to start now. And Robert, you correct me if I'm wrong, but building a building with the intention of a long-term lease or already putting a long-term lease on a building that we haven't built yet, how does that work?
I mean, just to answer, I don't know the answer to that. We maybe I know we're meeting with Head Start tomorrow, so maybe we can ask them that question. I don't know if they're able to do that, like have a lease on a future building. I'm not sure.
Say, Robert, this is Dick again. During the last referendum, I was called to a meeting over and some friends from Islands of Beaufort. and talked to a gentleman there who lives out on Spanish Wells Road, and I think it's in Beaufort. And he was saying that why are we building stuff when we could be leasing it? And I said, well, the referendum was already by that time already set, and it didn't mention anything about a lease. Is using a lease by the district an option? What this guy told me, he says, I build lease properties for government agencies all over South Carolina. Why can't I build a lease property for the school district? I can do it faster. I can do it cheap. I can do it faster. I can do it cheaper. I don't know if that's true or not, but is that even an option? Have you heard about that being done?
So I'm familiar with that being done in the federal government level. I'm familiar with that being done in charter schools. I'm not familiar with a public school district that has done that. So, because we can ask, like one of our issues, I guess, would be that we can ask for referendum funds to build a structure for capital improvements, but a lease would be operational funds.
Yeah, right.
So and that would be more of a legal question. I think Wendy joined us. I'm not sure we could use referendum funds to pay a lease. So that's your difference, is you would then be using your operations fund, which would cause a rise in the millage because you're increasing operations.
Right. I explained that all to him, but I thought maybe some school districts have found a way to do it. Taking out operations funds is a non-starter because that's a commitment, long-term commitment for a lease. And I don't think that's a wise move for the district to have that kind of a commitment out of operations funds. So,
no, I would agree.
I will add the way that we're looking at the way that we do pre-K right now in Bluffton, because we look at it more as a cluster-based approach versus your home school. Now, of course, we try to get all of the children in their home school starting off. Once those waiting lists, and I used waiting lists very loosely because we essentially we don't have waiting list in Beaufort because we're offering spots for every single child who's eligible. But once those spots in their home school fill up, we then start looking outside of their home school. And we currently have 2 what we call out of zone classrooms at Michael C. Riley and 1 at Red Cedar Elementary School. So the children who do not have a spot at their home school, and that mostly affects River Ridge Academy and Pritchardville Elementary School. We do every once in a while have some from Okatee that need to go, and then a few recently from Bluffton Elementary School or Early Childhood Center that are now having to go over to those 2 out-of-zone classrooms. They are offered a spot at those 2 schools. So we are able to accommodate the need. But as you know, the numbers that I showed you last week at the board meeting, those numbers are growing rapidly and in quicker numbers than I thought they would.
If no one else has any questions, I just wanted to kind of make a comment, I think, and perhaps a question for Ashley. It sounds like we kind of need, because I know you mentioned changing those metrics by which we judge
Right.
Qualifications for entrance into the ECC. So it sounds like we almost need 2 scenarios or 2 plans, if you will. And I think personally that both of them should include Head Start. But I think we need to know if we change the metrics, how many children could that potentially capture? What does that look like? I don't know if you can tell in what areas of Bluffton and get that, granular in the search. And then also another one, if we kept it the same, about how many do we anticipate the growth to be in the coming years, just so that we get an idea of.
So I do have those numbers with me.
Okay.
I don't have them added up as a whole, south of the Broad cluster, but I have them broken out by schools. So we could easily add as I'm reading this off to you. So if we start looking at taking, let's just start at the 70th percentile and below. Now, granted, these are based off of 2018-19 school year numbers, but like at Bluffton Elementary School, we would need 10 additional spots. And that would be an entire classroom. So remember, the ratio in pre-kindergarten is 20 students to 2 teachers. Okay. At Hilton Head, Michael C. Riley, we would need 6 additional spots. Okatee, we would need 4 additional spots. Pritchardville, 13 additional spots. But keep in mind, at Pritchardville, I already have a waiting list of about 20 to 25 students on a given year that we're sending or giving opportunities at another school. So they currently have 2 pre-kindergarten classrooms. They could actually use an additional 3 classrooms to accommodate the waiting list, and then accommodate if we moved the percentile up. But with Pritchardville, we can't keep up with the growth in pre-K. That waiting list gets longer and longer each year we screen. And the number of children we screen continues to go up. At Red Cedar, 8 additional seats. River Ridge is the same as Pritchardville. They would need 11 additional seats. But again, they have a waiting list on a given year between 10 and 15 children that we offer to a different location. And River Ridge was my last school. Now, keep in mind with these numbers, it is known in Beaufort in Bluffton, how you qualify for pre-K. So if we say, okay, now we're taking a greater, changing that metrics and looking at pre-K a different way, just like when we converted Hilton Head Early Childhood Center to a full day program, we had children being screened that we never expected to be screened because now it's a full day program. So when that word gets out that you change the metrics, the word will get out as, oh, I need to go get my child screened. We're going to have more screened. So there'll be need to be planned for a little bit of growth there.
Basically, we would need to build buildings in order to accommodate. It looks like that it would be something that we would have to request in a referendum so we can build something, because if we're going to be pulling, you stated before about pulling some of these kids out to put in a building or expanding an existing building, do we have the space in these schools to expand to add 2 or 3 more classrooms? Is that even possible?
That, Robert, like at Pritchardville, I don't know the answer to that.
So I could go through these, Bluffton L, we pretty much, I'd say, maxed out. It's already as big as its core capacity. And Carol, jump in here if you wish in any way. MC Riley is one that the actual elementary school building is one where we could add a couple classrooms. It was originally designed to have a couple extra. Okatee is one where we actually have land in front of Okatee. Mm-hmm. So Okatee, it would be difficult to expand the existing building, but you could either add on a whole nother wing or a whole nother building at Okatee. Pritchardville, there's really no way to expand Pritchardville. Not that I'm in favor of. How about that? Red Cedar, there's really no way to expand Red Cedar at all. River Ridge, of course, we've maxed out River Ridge now, so we're kind of done with River Ridge. And I would say, as far as land goes, our 2 locations with land right now, so I think this will stir in a whole nother conversation. Our only places we have land right now are May River and Okatee, that we could build another building. And of course, those are at the outer edges of the Bluffton area. And I'm a little concerned at May River about how many buildings we put on there. We have the high school now. We plan to put either an elementary or pre-K or middle. And then we do have a small space for another smaller building kind of on that site that could be an ECC. But again, those are on the outer edges of the Bluffton area.
Thank you.
Carol, did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered it well. I think it does spur on that bigger conversation of, beginning that long-term planning, like Colonel Geier said. So,
Geier?
Thank you. Robert, are mobiles appropriate for use for pre-K?
I think they can be, yes. I mean, maybe that's a better question for Ashley. They can be used for that, yes.
Will we free up enough mobiles that this might be a quick fix?
Well, Ashley, do you agree with that?
I'm hesitant, a little hesitant about mobiles. And the reason, and I know they do have restrooms in them, and I know they have water and all of those things. We talked a little bit about when Pritchardville put the mobiles in at Pritchardville, if it was appropriate for pre-kindergarten to go out because of the young age of the students, and the access they need to therapies, and some of them are in early childhood special education where their therapist would be in and out of the classroom. And the walking distance from the cafeteria to the mobiles, it's not always best to do that with the little people. It's much easier to put them in the school building and put a older grade level where they're a little bit more independent outside in a mobile unit. And that's just my opinion.
and I'm gonna chime in if you don't mind. The other thing would be mobiles are usually a lot smaller square footage, and just the way pre-K does instruction, you probably would not be able to serve as many students in those rooms either. So you would need even more mobiles to serve the same amount of students, in a regular classroom. So you might need 1.5 mobiles, let's just say, to serve the same number of students.
We do have a square footage requirement.
Yes.
Pre-K and K are our biggest classrooms. You're usually 1,000 square feet, where mobiles are usually in the 750 to 800 square foot range.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, could I have one additional question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Ashley, would you anticipate any political pushback from present owners of daycare and preschool if we expand our own district program?
I do believe we will get some political pushback, yes. Keeping in mind, these are our child care providers, our private child care providers are also businesses. Yes. So essentially that 4-year-old and that family is a paying customer at their business. And so, yes, there will be some political pushback. But as we continue, if our plan is pre-K for all, then the nice thing that we are doing it in phases. So it's not you're losing all of your customer base. I do feel that there are some families in Beaufort, as well as across the United States, that will still want their private child care provider. And that's absolutely a choice that they have. So,
Ashley, and perhaps Robert, let me ask this question. How many average classrooms are in an ECC building? So what is it like?
Actually, I laugh because Robert and I just had this conversation yesterday. We usually, there are about 18 classrooms in an ECC, early learning centers. North of the Broad, they're called early learning centers. South of the Broad, they're called early childhood centers.
Right.
Don't ask me why, but that's what we've called them. So there is a reason behind that. But when you're looking at this, and when we looked at this several years ago, we figured we needed about 15 to 16 classrooms, and that includes a Head Start component as well. Yes. But as we're looking at moving up that percentile or that matrix, that's when Robert and I talked about possibly needing 2 buildings.
Right. It seems to me, based on the numbers you gave me for the 70%, that was on my rough calculations, like you said, 15 to 16 classrooms, and then building in for that additional Head Start, and then buffer for, because those are 18, 19 numbers.
Right.
That easily surpasses 18.
Right. And that was not looking at changing that matrix. So it would have stayed the same at the 50th percentile. And this was also probably 4 or 5 years ago. We did not account for the growth that we've seen recently. The other piece to that is, and that's where I go back to my first piece of this when I started talking, is, are we looking at removing the pre-Ks from the existing buildings? And now they're all in early, in a cluster-based approach, early learning center or early childhood center? Or are they staying, and these are additional classrooms that we're adding to serve additional children?
And then I think the other conversation that needs to be had is, obviously when you build a new building, you're going to need staff, and that new building is going to be an additional cost to the district. So I think that needs to be a conversation, is what is the impact going to be on our operational budget? What kind of funding do we get, for these facilities and things like that? I'm not sure if you guys have run any preliminary numbers on that.
I talked to Tanya today about that exact same subject, and of course she's very concerned about growth in operational revenue requirements. And it really depends a lot what the governor decides. The governor's come out saying he wants to do this, but I don't recall seeing much in the budget for this year. Now, when you look at catch-up money from the not the kind you put on French fries, but catch up money from the feds for COVID learning loss, and this may or may not be able to be used for the staffing piece, but that's only the one-time piece, and that gives us a recurring operational cost. So, but it might be worth looking at that in the initial, if we can find the space in the initial program, to be able to show a better performance out of kindergarten because of the results of having the pre-K experiment done, and we could see what kind of growth we get, and we may be able to justify that with some metrics that say this is what you get from PK instruction. That's what we'd have to do to be able to have a recurring program.
Mr. Otting, your hand is raised.
Well, I was just going to say, the one good thing about these pre-K that we're adding, these are all students that aren't currently in the district. I mean, they're not currently being served at that grade. So as we add them, of course, comes with them additional revenue on top of that. So
Right. That's a good point too. And what I was going to say, Colonel Geier, to your point on, the governor being on his priority list, I think that perhaps we need to reach out to our delegation, to our lobbyists, and see what are they hearing in the halls in Columbia, and are they seeing that there is an appetite for that this year, perhaps next year, so we have a better inclination of where that might go. I only know the things that I've read in in the newspaper and things like that. So we certainly could reach out to them because I think that goes on to the conversation. We would have a better idea of whether or not we need to go with like a plan A, a more conservative approach in the keeping our metric the same, or do we need to open things up to the 70% so that also that goes long-term to the achievement gap. So.
Yeah.
Do you think that I should just include that in my report as a discussion item to the full board?
Yeah.
What do you think, Angela? I think so.
Ms. Middleton, sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Let me make a note here. Okay. Is there anything else in regard to this agenda item, or did anybody have anything else to add to that?
Well, because I'm gonna kind of lead us into another conversation for future topics is where, if we do build the next building, where is the best location? I want to ask Ashley that. Where would you say the best location is? Is May River a suitable location?
If we're looking at Bluffton as more of a cluster-based approach to pre-kindergarten, of course, serving them at their home schools first. This new school may or may not have its own attendance zone. I don't know. We cannot have 4-year-olds on buses for longer than, more than 30 minutes. I know that's not always practical, but when you're putting a 4-year-old on a bus for longer than 45 minutes to an hour, you are asking for little ones to fall asleep, little ones who need potty breaks, and it just makes it way too long of a ride for them. And to be honest with you, when we tried transportation at these 2 out-of-zone classrooms in a cluster-based approach, and I was very forthcoming with parents very early on saying that your child may be on a bus for longer than 45 minutes to an hour. They typically chose, no, I'll take them myself. And if they did try the bus and it was longer than an hour, they usually stopped taking the bus because it's just too long for a little some of these children coming in are 3 years old. And it's just too long of a bus ride. So May River, if we're looking at a cluster-based approach, the answer I think would be too far. It's too far out. If we looked at more of a centralized location like a River Ridge or somewhere closer to Michael C. Riley or somewhere in the middle, that's where I think the best location would be for a cluster-based approach.
And I'll just add so the board can keep this in their mind for an ECC. We actually need probably about the least amount of land of any of our school buildings, obviously. So you could be 10 acres or less and have an ECC.
How many acres are at that Okatee site?
It's 9 or 12. It's
I was-
right. It's
I was
right close.
thinking 15 to 20, so I'm not sure.
I had written in our slides that
We
it
can-
would fit in ECC.
Yes.
But anything bigger than that, it would be difficult.
We can look that up real quick while we're talking, actually. So.
If we were looking at 2 buildings, 2 early childhood centers, then they could be a little bit spread out. You could maybe have one centrally located and then one more spread out. You could easily do that, but with only one, you would definitely need it to be a centralized location.
If I can just remind you that those of you that have been on the board a little bit, we have discussed the property not far from River Ridge in the past.
Where is that located? Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I interjected. Where is that located?
Right next to River Ridge.
Okay, I'm visualizing River Ridge and how.
On Bluffton Parkway. You know where the school's located?
Yes,
Yeah,
right as you turn in?
Yes.
Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I don't know if it's still for sale, to be honest with you, though.
Dr. Wisnefski,
Yes, sir.
this is something we need to talk to when we talk to the city of Bluffton,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a selling point for these contractors and developers that are coming in, and we could sure use some donations of some land, and you've mentioned that before. So, I think, especially when we talk about the 82% number, shocking, because I always kind of thought that was single parent poverty, but with 82%, that's more than single parent poverty. That's 2 working parents that just really don't have the time and energy to spend much time with their kids on reading and writing and language and vocabulary. So this is a bigger issue than I thought it was when we were first discussing this. And when I saw those test scores, I was shocked, but I shouldn't have been, based on the way it is now, with the both parents having to work. And so
Yeah. The Bluffton population is, young working parents. So it makes sense that there needs to be, another ECC to accommodate those students. And so beyond the land donation, but also as we talk about Head Start, I don't know off the top of my head, but the town of Bluffton may have buildings or facilities or places for Head Start to be accommodated as well for a long-term lease. So that's a conversation we could look at as well.
Can I add something to that? The Beaufort County Early Childhood Coalition has also been addressing this issue of childcare in Bluffton. So, knowing that the need for a Head Start program and additional pre-kindergarten programs, we've done a little research on. In Bluffton, there's also no sliding scale fee-based childcare. And when I talk about sliding scale, I'm talking about you take a parent's income and that's the fee that they pay for their child in childcare. Since the Children's Center is no longer in Bluffton, and that's been several years now, that was the last sliding scale facility that I was aware of. We're not aware of any others at this time. We're also, research has showed us that the waiting list in Bluffton for childcare, you're starting to have to get on those lists prenatally.
Oh, yeah.
So as you become, yes. So when you're pregnant, you now get on a childcare waiting list in the Bluffton area. It is a bigger problem than we thought, and that's why the coalition took the challenge on as well. Head Start was in Bluffton in collaboration with the Children's Center, but then when the Children's Center had to close, then Head Start did not have a space as well. They have been looking for space in the Bluffton area as well. They're in the same position, and of course I don't want to speak for them, but they're pretty much in the same position we are, that they are going to need to build something in order to have programs over there.
And thank you, Mr. Otting. Mr. Otting says that the Okatee property is 22 acres. It's for reference. Yeah, those are good points, because when I was pregnant with my first daughter, who just turned 10 yesterday, I was told, you need to get on a waiting list now. And that was 10 years ago. So it is definitely difficult to get childcare and to get on those lists. Now we've got more options now than we used to 10 years ago, but still, right. I've heard the same. Okay, well, that's really good information for us then, moving forward as we discuss this. Is there, for future agenda topics, I have trying to see if our next meeting date works for the town of Bluffton, as well as the realtors that may be able to attend that meeting as well. So I have those two. Does anyone have anything else or any follow-up to any of these items?
No.
Well, there was a topic we wanted to kind of address. I don't know if it's best to have that at the same time the realtors are there, but that would be land.
Gotcha. Okay, so
it'd be good to have with the town of Bluffton, but maybe not the best to have with the realtors.
Got it. Okay, so, well, first I have to find out if that works, if the date works for the town of Bluffton, our next meeting date. So I will get back to everybody on what I hear back on that date. Our next meeting is scheduled for what, Robin? Let's see here.
Our next meeting is scheduled for April the 22nd. That's the fourth Tuesday. Now there are 5 Tuesdays in April, so I don't know if you want to go to the 29th.
No, the 29th. Don't we have the SIC meeting?
Yes, and that's at 6 o'clock. We're proposing that at 6. That would start at 6:30.
Right.
Okay.
Actually, let me take that back on the land. You could have the realtors there because we're very early into that discussion. We're just wanting to know what might be available that could even fit a school. And that's going to be a select few pieces of property, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I will see who all can be in attendance at that April 22nd meeting. That's at 5 p.m., correct, Robin?
At 5 o'clock, yes.
Okay. So I will get back to everybody if there's any changes on either of those, because of course that will change the agenda if they both can't be there or if we need to have a special meeting. So I will get back to you all. Robert?
And that will be a Zoom meeting, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Did anyone have anything else?
No. Thank you all.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Go ahead. I second that one.
All right. Thank you so much, y'all.
You.
Bye.
Have a great evening.